Well, in today's episode, we're going to talk about the decision that I made to move away from where I'm currently living, which is not too far from the town that I grew up in. But I want to talk to you about kind of this whole decision to move away, especially because I've lived in this general area here my entire life. So I want to share what I'm feeling. I want to share how I'm preparing. I want to share what I envision the future to look like. And if you are someone who's thinking about moving, especially if you are maybe single and thinking about making this move because you're feeling it, it's time, this is the video for you. This is the podcast episode for you that you're listening to. Welcome. Let's get started. If you are new here, welcome to the Strength, Yoga, and Freedom podcast. This is the podcast where we use the philosophy of yoga just in a very practical and everyday way, one small step at a time, especially with things like moving, right? To create more happiness in our life, to create more purpose in our life, to turn our life around and to move in the direction that we want to move in, because that creates happiness. Living in a life that you feel like you're stuck in all the time or you're making no progress is not growing at all. So if you're listening to this podcast or you're watching this on YouTube, you probably have already figured out that there's something inside of you that is looking to make some changes. At least I hope that's why you're listening or watching. So, but maybe you're watching for another reason. Whatever that is, I'm glad that you're here. So let's have a conversation about me moving. This is actually something that I've wanted to talk to you all about for a while. And I decided to make this episode kind of as an introduction to this journey. So what I envision this to being is really kind of letting you in on how things are going along the way. So as I prepare to make this move, I want you to also see how things are going, in the hopes that if you also are thinking about making changes, whatever that might be, you might even be moving to just a new neighborhood, perhaps some of this will resonate with you, because that's the whole goal here. I want to create content that's going to be relatable for you, and also drive you in the lane, continue to drive you in that lane of purpose, which ultimately leads to happier days, right? So we're going to kind of like walk through this together, and we're going to talk about what's been going on, why I've made this decision, where do I live now, where am I going, why have I decided to make all these changes and make a move. So currently, I live in Northeast Ohio. So it's about, I would say it's about almost 90 minutes between Cleveland and Pittsburgh. So kind of like in the middle of that, but in like a Northeast Ohio, almost into Western Pennsylvania type of town over here is where I live. And I grew up and I attended school actually in a really small suburb here named Girard, Ohio, which is a really small kind of town it's been around for a very, very long time. But I went to school there, elementary school there. And then when I grew up, I went to, and into high school, I went to high school in Youngstown, Ohio. And I also went to Youngstown State University, which is also in Youngstown, which is a kind of a bigger city, but not as big as, your Cleveland or your Pittsburgh. But again, sort of like in that Northeast Ohio area. And then, since I kind of grew up in Girard and moved out of the house that I grew up in, I've moved to different areas kind of within sort of this like 30-mile radius north or south of where Girard is. But I kind of hovered around this Northeast Ohio corner, the corner of Ohio that I'm in. And it's just been like one suburb after the next, which is where I've been. Now, where I am now, I've been here the longest, but there's been two other moves before this. So as most of you know who've been following me, I love my theme parks. And in fact, we just had 2 episodes that just aired in the past 2 weeks on planning theme park trips. I hope you really enjoyed those. I loved making those videos. We're going to do more on that stuff in the summer. But if you haven't had a chance to listen to those or watch those on YouTube, I highly suggest you do it. Even if you're not really planning a theme park trip, it's super fun to kind of really get excited about something and kind of understand that there are always intentions behind everything that you're processing and everything you're planning, including theme park trips. So I think it's a really good a couple episodes to listen to or watch. So anyway, in Ohio, we even now and for a long time and still to this day, we have a great theme park. Couple of great theme parks here with great coasters, like a great roller coaster collection in Ohio. Most of you know that know a lot about theme parks or have heard about theme parks. One of the bigger ones, one of the kind of destination resort theme parks in Ohio is Cedar Point. It's known for its roller coasters. It's been here for over 100 years. In fact, I think it's over 150 years now. And so when I was growing up, you had Cedar Point, which is in Sandusky. We also had a kind of a regional amusement park that turned into a mega park, and there's a whole thing about that. I think I'm going to do a video on that in a podcast episode about Geauga Lake too, because I love Geauga Lake. Doesn't exist anymore, which is really sad. But anyway, we're getting off track. But anyway, Geauga Lake was there as well. And then we also, if you drive to West Mifflin, PA, which is on the other side of Pittsburgh, you have Kennywood. So there were 3 kind of parks in this driving distance that you could go to for a day and then drive back. So that was kind of really exciting for me to have. And then there was this other park that's in driving distance, but it takes about 3.5 hours, 3 hours, 45 minutes, almost 4 with your stops. If you stop, it takes about that long to get there. And so a really nice, overnight stay, having an overnight stay, I should say, is really nice because you're driving that long. But this is in Mason, Ohio, which is outside of Cincinnati, Ohio. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. Kings Island, that's Kings Island, which is in southwest Ohio, which we're going to talk about that in a minute. And I'm talking about these theme parks for a reason. So let's move on. We're going to talk just a minute, though. I want to go back to kind of me and growing up and the why behind I've made this decision. So my childhood and my young adult life, most of my 20s and even into my the very early part of my 30s, I always thought that you just kind of grew up, you went to college, and then you just got a job, you worked, and then you retired. In fact, I started doing that. I went to school and I have my bachelor's degree in secondary education, language arts, English, is what I specialized in. And I actually taught for a couple years. And then I moved on to doing some other things, but most of it was manager work and supervisory and then leadership positions, training positions where I always oversaw people. I always had people reporting to me for a very, very long time. And then all of a sudden, things started to change and you wind up losing jobs that you think are secure because things change. You wind up getting other jobs and losing them because things change. So this whole notion of you're always going to have a secure job and then you're going to retire, and it doesn't matter what your profession is, things change. So I didn't really know this and understand this because my childhood was not pleasant. I did not have parents that were very guiding or teaching me things or loving. Didn't have any of that. So the thing is I had to figure all this stuff out on my own. And so the other thing that was going on when I was younger is there was really not a presence of the internet until I was in probably into high school and into my college years is when the internet kind of started to really take off. So that wasn't even around. And of course, there was no smartphone then. I mean, at the end of high school and into early college, you have started to have flip phones, but there was no, mobile computer that you're walking around with all the time that we have now. Every one of us has a smartphone for the most part that we can just access information. So there was none of this information when I was growing up. So there was no traveling anywhere, no understanding that there was more out there for me in the world. I didn't take trips. There was none of that stuff except to those amusement parks. That's where I did go. But other than that, I didn't really understand and realize that there was a whole world out there for me to sink my teeth into. I always thought that traveling places was simply because I was going on vacation. And that was the only time you traveled. And you think when you go on vacation, oh my gosh, I could live here. I would love to live here. And while that's a great, kind of a fantasy for some of us, the reality is living somewhere where you take vacations can sometimes have false expectations. And I'm not saying that it always happens, because there are people who have moved to their favorite vacation destinations and built lives, and that's fantastic. But you can't always live your whole life on a vacation. It doesn't always work like that, right? So that's kind of how I thought about all of that stuff in the past. Now, with the advent of technology and the evolution kind of our I don't know, our human experience, our society, the way that we evolve as a human species, and technology starts to get more, accessible at our fingertips, and you start to really see over the past decade, even maybe less than a decade or so, you see people making these leaps and jumps. Either you see it on social media, you see blogs written about it. So the advent of technology and the advent of the internet, the advent of smartphones, all of these kind of advances, right? This moving away from your hometown is suddenly more visible to everyone. It's not that people didn't do this before, but it's more visible now than it ever was before. And so this was something that, I didn't, again, as I mentioned, I wasn't aware of any of this stuff as a kid. So now growing up, and I'm like, oh my gosh, there's this whole world out there. And maybe that sounds to you like I'm a naive person, but truth be told, that's what I believed for a very, very long time, that there wasn't much out there and I was supposed to just live this kind of structured life. But as I've gotten a little bit older and as I've gone through my journey in yoga, which I'm going to talk about in a moment, you start to understand that there is so much that you could be doing, and we have the technology to do it, and we have the ability to do things much easier, much more fluid than we used to be able to do before all of this. So now that that's accessible to me, you kind of start thinking about that. So there's all of this kind of awareness about, people saying, I don't want to live here anymore. I want to go here because this is where, I know I can start my life, or where my job is going to take me, or where I want to build a business, or where I want to build this particular, whatever it is. Maybe you want to build a home somewhere else, or you want to bring your family to a new area. Whatever the case, it's much easier now than it used to be because of the advent of technology. You also have those great virtual tours, and you can see all your apartments to rent. You just don't have to go to the leasing office and just, you don't do all that legwork anymore. Everything's online, which makes it easier. Now, with all of that being said, so you kind of have, I never really understood and fully understood, look, there's a place to go here, man. You can get out of here if it's not you don't feel it. And I wasn't feeling it for a long time. So let's go back to those theme parks I mentioned, kind of the driving distances to the theme parks. I mentioned those parks that were kind of driving distance to where I am now. And then, in 2005, I was 22 years old in 2005, and I took my first trip, that 4-hour trip to Kings Island in Mason, Ohio, which, as I said before, again, 4 hours. I went with 3 friends who I was working with at the time. But there was actually something about that trip that never left me, and not necessarily just Kings Island. At that time, it was Paramount's Kings Island, so it was very different than it is now. But the whole area, there was something that just never left me. And that was 2005. So we're talking almost 20 years ago that this happened. So now over the next maybe 16 years, 17 years or so, I would make a regular annual trip to that area in Mason, Ohio, in that Cincinnati. It's north of Cincinnati, but just that whole area down there. I would go down there and I would stay for 3 or 4 nights. And I started to explore what else was around down there. So there was also another trip that I made one time that I went there, and then I went further. Like I went about 4.5, maybe 5 more hours down towards the Smoky Mountains. And I had gotten a cabin down there with some friends, and we stayed down there. So this was like a we did a couple things in one trip, but that was super awesome for me too. Just in going down to that Cincinnati area and then crossing the border, into Kentucky and then down into Tennessee. There was something that just, again, never left me. And the truth is, I always felt like I belonged in Southwest Ohio ever since that initial trip in 2005. So when I started my yoga journey many, many years later, things began to drastically shift. I started to feel like something else was calling me. Now, I started practicing yoga in 2018. So this was not like it was 2005 when that initial trip happened, and then all of a sudden, boom, something struck me. This took a while. And when I started to become aware of things, become aware of what was happening in my life, become aware of who I was around and where I was physically, and then when I started teaching yoga and diving in even deeper, I knew that something else was calling me. But unfortunately, we all know what happened in 2020. So there was a lot of stopping of everything, right? We were forced to stop. Really, any kind of life, we had to stop. So after that all passed, it took, a couple years for us, right? To kind of rebuild and make our way out of that with all the ups and downs. And then I started to travel again. But this was different. And so when we got into 2023, which was last year, I literally said to myself, this is going to be the year where I start to go down to Southwest Ohio more and more, because there was always something drawing me there. Not just Kings Island, which is great, but there was something else. And so from all the years of visiting once a year, and then from making multiple trips last year, I knew that that was the place that I wanted to be in. And so I made the decision that Southwest Ohio was going to be the next place, that next spot that I'll make my home, the next chapter of my life. So that's where I'm going to be headed, is down Southwest Ohio within that Cincinnati region somewhere. Now, there's a few reasons why I am also going there that's not based on just the feel of it, which I believe the feel of it is very important, but there's some other reasons. In Northeast Ohio, we sometimes face what we call lake effect snow. So there's this, and I'm no meteorologist and I don't know all the weather terms, so if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But from what I understand is there's kind of the band of, like snow that hits that northern and northeast Ohio area that comes from Lake Erie, and it's so cold and it's so filled with moisture that it just dumps tons of snow in this area. And it makes really difficult winters sometimes for you driving, for you shoveling, for your working, whatever it is. Very difficult up this way. And I know, and I am aware now that, like I'm not moving to Mexico here where there's no snow, I'm going still to an area that experiences a winter. So it's the same state. It's, hundreds of miles away, but it's not as though I'm going to, there's no snow at all. I know there's no snow, but there's no lake effect snow there, which is really nice. That makes a huge difference. And the average temperatures appear to be a little warmer there. And while I do like the seasons, I'm just not a fan of winter in general. It feels, if you've watched me talk about the cold months and what I have to do to keep myself kind of busy during the cold months, then you know that can be challenging. And maybe it's challenging for you too if you're not a winter person. So I would really like to be somewhere where the weather is just a little bit more on the milder side when it comes to winter. And honestly, it gets a little warmer even there in the summers too, and I love hot weather. So now I also have, I've dabbled with, in some of the years of traveling as I've got older, I've traveled to places like California and Nevada and Arizona and Texas and Florida and Georgia and Louisiana and some of these other kind of southern locations or western locations. I've also traveled to the New England area and done some couple travels there. Mainly these places were either through cruises or if I wanted to visit a theme park or some kind of destination. But none of those areas have ever struck me the way that Cincinnati area has ever struck me. None of them have. At least not in this time in my life, because we know that things can affect us in certain stages of our life differently. So there's that. And then another reason I'm ready to make this move is because this house that I live in here is really starting to feel boring, and I'm feeling stuck here. I feel like I have too much space. I feel like I have too many things. This stage of my life, I don't need this, and it's starting to feel that way, like it's too big and there's too much. And it feels like that can become overwhelming and also boring at the same time. I've lived here for a very, very long time. And so I've tried doing things like rearranging rooms and moving things around and moving something from one room to the other and this and this and this. But it really just feels like I've outgrown this house. And maybe you understand that feeling of when you outgrow something or someone or some place. You just know when you've outgrown it, when it just feels like you're going through the motions. When life feels boring, when things feel boring, it's because you're not being challenged anymore, right? So the other thing was my very first cat, Buddy, who I actually adopted Buddy when I was living in my house where I grew up, way back. And so then Cody came along and I adopted Cody and we moved here, the three of us. And so this was kind of like our house for a while. Like the three of us had this house, and then Buddy passed away. And then, Dylan came along last year, but then Cody passed away at the beginning of this year. So now that whole original family of me and Buddy and Cody is gone. And now it's just me and Dylan. But even though Dylan brings such an enormous flavor, and, meaning to my life and I in his life, there's still this feeling like this is not the house we're going to cultivate some type of life in. This is just not it. This was the house that Buddy and Cody and I were building the life, and now they're gone. And staying here has a lot of memories of them as well. And so we know it's important to not live in the past, learn from it and moving forward, but not stay stuck there. And so Dylan is still very young. He's a year old, so he's super, crazy and bouncy in that kitten kind of growing up stage, and he's very adaptable right now. If I would have taken Cody at the age of 19 years old and moved him down across the state or into somewhere else, I don't know if he would have made it. This was his home. He was very comfortable here. And so really the thought of starting over again in a new place with Dylan makes me super happy as well. So not only is this house becoming kind of boring, but this whole area is becoming boring for me. And not because there's absolutely nothing here, but it's because the population isn't very high. There's fewer things to do than I would like. There's fewer places to go. And guess what? I've been there and I've done that, being here all my life. And now I'm feeling like I have outgrown the area as well. And again, I'm not saying the area is horrible. I'm saying for me personally, I feel like I've outgrown it. Now, my childhood also, not only was my childhood tough when it comes to the amount of things I did not know, but it was not full of love whatsoever. It was full of demeaning. It was full of anger. It was full of control. It was full of manipulation. It was full of gaslighting. It was full of narcissism. That's all my life was. So now that I understand really what life means and what it is and what love really means, and it's not that ass backward narcissistic shit, right? I feel like this place is not, I've outgrown it. There's no use for me here anymore. I don't have any children. I don't have, a partner. I don't have a job that I have to stay here to do. I don't have any of that. So I'm not tied down to anything. So I need to leave that past behind. That's crucial. I've learned a ton from it. And for all the narcissistic people that were in my life in the past, I thank them because they've taught me how never to act, how never to treat people, how never to lead my life. But it's time to leave all of that behind. So I want to become part of a bigger community. And so now this whole area around Cincinnati, super full of yoga, which is fantastic. It has a very active and robust yoga community. Not that there's not one here, but there's just more people there, which is going to give me a bigger part of a bigger community to become a part of and to teach in and to be part, to be ensconced in. Let's also not forget, of course, Kings Island is there. Now, of course, Kings Island, amusement parks are great for me. There's just something special about Kings Island for me. It has become my favorite amusement park that I've ever been to. There's something about the way it feels. There's something about the way that they do things there. It seems hospitable. Like everybody is so genuine and kind, and it's very different than visiting some of the other parks where it's relaxed. Some other parks can feel like you are flying through, pounding out roller coasters or pounding out your rides and all of that. It just feels different there. And they have an awesome water park, an awesome place to lay out and catch some sun. We have none of that here where I live. None of it. And that is a passion of mine. And I need to be near a passion of mine. I need to be where there is something that's going to fulfill my heart and not somewhere that there's no fulfillment going on. So Kings Island, yeah, it's the cherry on top. And yeah, if I could get in the car and drive 15 minutes and be at a theme park, I'm a happy guy too. Not that that's all my happiness, but it is a big part of what makes me tick. Adventure, thrills, outside, all of that great stuff. So yeah, this is all about the feeling. And yeah, it feels right. And yeah, it feels like that's where I belong. And when I go there, it feels like it's harder and harder to come back home too when I take those trips down there. So what does this all mean? Well, at the end of my lease, yeah, I'm going. This is the year. We're out of here. And I actually I have this little voice that'll say to me like, do you really want to go now or do you want to stay that one more year? Because you're pretty secure in what's going on. You're making decent money. You have a good group of people around you now. You've got your, kind of things are a little bit more under control. Things are going, you're working hard. Why would you interrupt that? Well, because that's the only way to grow, right? And I'm terrified of that. And I'm scared of that. And I am, again, terrified. I won't know anyone in that area when I move. I don't know anybody. Now, I might know, there are a few people that, there is a yoga studio that I know that is actually affiliated with the yoga studio I teach at here. So there is a little connection there, which is kind of cool. But the thing is there will be nobody else that I know. There's no family, there's no friends, there's nobody. And I don't even have a job lined up, right? I don't even have a place to live because my lease does not expire here until the fall. So I'm still going to be here for a little while because I'm not breaking a lease and paying lots and lots and lots and lots of money. That's an irresponsible thing for me to do, and it will set me back. But there is also a method to taking these calculated risks, which I'm going to talk about in just a second. So I'm in this kind of like early stage. I'm getting ready. There are, from the time I'm recording this until I plan to go there's about 7, maybe 8 months left. It's like the final season of a TV show. Like we're in the final year. The farewell season is here. And so when it comes to making this calculated risks are important because when you start to feel like you're safe and secure, it means the growth is going to stop. And I don't want any kind of growth to stop. So it's a scary risk, but it's a good calculated risk. So we know you can't do anything overnight. If I just picked up and left and went overnight, that would throw me into an anxiety level that is unmanageable for me. So you have to make the decisions based on, what's best for you and how you can handle things. Just know that if you don't do anything at all, you're going to remain stuck. So you have to start to make changes. It may not take you 7 months to move, or it may not take you a year. It may take you 3 weeks. You may have to pick up and leave for your job quickly. Like, those things happen, but I'm not in that position. I'm in a position where I have the luxury and the blessing of some time, where nothing is expiring, nothing's going to change, and I have some time to start working out this calculated risk. So obviously the first step was to take inventory of all right, what's going on around me? What do I need? What don't I need? And I realized I had too many things. As I mentioned earlier in the video, I have so many things and so much space. It's time to start getting rid of things, selling things, giving things away, and starting to purge. And systematically, since I've been thinking about this for a while, for the past maybe 7 or 8 to 10 months, I have started to systematically get rid of things, little by little, one by one, bag by bag, box by box, and starting to clear things out, getting rid of things room by room, cabinet by cabinet, closet by closet too, right? Furniture. Very minimal furniture going. Furniture that's in this house has been here for so long, it isn't going, okay? Some of the other personal belongings aren't going. If I don't use them, I'm not bringing them. Because when you understand that you're growing as a person and you are listening to your inner voice and that voice in your head that sends you those whispers and talks to you, and where you understand hey, there's more out there for you, start inching your way towards it. That progress principle, little by little by little, step by step by step. You then are moving forward in purpose, and you realize the things that used to serve you, these belongings I had before, these habits I had before, the things I used to do, the people I used to hang around with before, are no longer serving me. They're gone, because it's time to change the chapter, turn the page, new chapter coming. So when you start to move forward and make a big change like that, you realize things are starting to fall away from you. It could be money, it could be possessions, it could be physical things, places. They start to just fall away. Relationships change and fall away, because those things that change are not going with you into your new chapter. They can't go with you, or they're going to hold you back. And so this is semi-calculated. But again, I have no job lined up, and I don't even have a place to live lined up yet. It is a while away yet. But the reason I'm bringing this to you now is because I want to take you through these steps. I want you to see, what is it like for someone to move, and do that taking a calculated risk. Now, I do know that deep down, I do know everything's going to be fine, and there's going to be a transition, and there's going to be times where I feel weird, where I don't feel grounded, where I get frustrated because I don't know where things are, or where you have to find, all those things that you do in your normal life, your doctors, your appointments, the places you get gas, the grocery stores, all of that stuff changes. And I know that there's going to be a period that feels scary, and that is going to feel unnerving, and it's going to feel like I made a mistake, because that's what we always do when we make changes. You think, oh God, I made a horrible mistake, right? But in my gut, there is nothing in my gut that says don't do this. Nothing. There's the voice in my head that's like, oh yeah, you're safe here, you're secure, you're good. But the gut is different, and that's where you got to go. You got to go from the core. So as we continue on, I want to give you updates on how this is going. And the only update I have now is that we're starting to purge. That's all for now, starting to purge. I am going to be making a trip down there. I have a longer trip planned in April that I'm going to be going on another cruise. And then when I get back from that, I'm going to head down there for probably about 3 or 4 days and start to take a look at some things. So we'll keep you posted on that. And the other thing I'm going to be doing is, so I don't feel so bored here, and I don't feel like I'm going through the same motions all the time, even though, daily life, going through the motions in daily life is important because it keeps you focused on your purpose. taking well-balanced time to do things that are fun and exciting is also critical. And so I'm going to be doing a lot of that this year as I prepare to move. There, as I mentioned, cruise coming up. I have theme park trips, and not just, hey, we're going to Kings Island or hey, we're going to Cedar Point. I have some other places planned. And so I want to make some variety happen, because if I don't do that, I'm going to feel like I'm stuck, and I'm going to have this thought in my mind that's going to make me feel bored and bitter and resentful and angry that I'm still here and I didn't choose to do this before. So that's a piece of advice I could give anybody. When you feel like you're starting to feel stuck and you know you're going to make a change, to start to do things that are balancing so you don't have that resentment build. The same goes when you're in relationships. If you know a relationship is going to take a turn, you may get resentful if you sit on things, right? And you just let things fester. The same thing happens when you're making big life decisions. If you let things fester and don't do anything about it, you're going to breed resentment. And I don't want that. I want to enjoy the next several months while I'm still around and while I'm able to do some of this stuff before this change occurs. So that's the goal. That's the plan. That's the purpose. And I want to say this too. As you follow me through this transition, I want you to understand that this chapter of my life, the curtain is going to close, because when I wake up every day and I go through my life, there's always a specific purpose in front of me. And that is, how can I serve others through my life, through my own life? How do I help someone solve their day-to-day problems, or the challenges, or the setbacks, or the wins that they face? How do I relate to those people? How do I help those people? And I do that through my own life, through my own stories, through the things I've learned, through my study of yoga, and the practical ways I'm bringing you the philosophy of it here, because every episode I create has something to do with a philosophy of yoga in its very basic form, even the planning the theme park stuff, right? So in order to do that purpose, live that purpose, I have to make this change. Because when I do that, I will be able to serve others a lot better. I cannot continue to serve others or myself in this current capacity. And so that's what I keep in my forefront. How can I help you? How can I help others while using my life as an example? But if I'm using my life as an example by staying in a place that I get miserable in sometimes, that's not serving anybody. And certainly not serving me. And I can't serve you if can't serve myself. So I hope that you stick around for this ride. It's going to be fun, but it's going to be scary, and I'm scared. But if you have any recommendations on moving, or tips or tricks or anything that you've had in your life, please leave a comment on the YouTube channel underneath the video. I would love to read it and hear your thoughts. You can connect with me on Instagram, TikTok now, or Facebook. All of those links are in the description of the video or on the show notes if you're listening to this through your podcast app. So until our next episode, I really, really hope that you are finding some fun and enjoyment in your day-to-day life, and you know your purpose. Because if it is to move, or if it is to make these big changes, remember, one step at a time, and suddenly those calculated risks become a reality. And you deserve that reality that you are going to create for yourself, full of abundance, joy, and happiness. You do deserve that. So until next time, my friends, have a fantastic rest of the day that you're listening or watching this, and have great days ahead. And I'll see you very, very soon.